In the heart of Upper Pines, the matriarch Cecilia Montgomery begins to suspect that something is profoundly wrong with the foundation that bears her family's name. An anonymous message and a visit to an empty plot of land reveal that her daughter-in-law, Beatrice, might be orchestrating a millionaire scam. Determined to protect the Montgomery legacy, Cecilia plunges into a solitary investigation that culminates in her own kidnapping. But it is from this darkness that she resurfaces with the truth in her hands, ready to confront, expose, and rebuild everything that has been corrupted. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. In Hampstead Heath, an affluent neighborhood in London, the Montgomery estate stood imposingly among century-old trees. The meticulously cared-for garden served as a kind of introduction to what was found within. Elegance, order, and a calculated beauty. Mrs. Cecilia Montgomery, at 75 years old, observed from her bedroom window the movement of the staff preparing the garden for yet another event of the foundation that bore her family's name. The wind gently swayed the silk curtains, bringing the aroma of the orchids she herself cultivated. Cecilia sighed, adjusting the pearl necklace she rarely took off her neck. That house no longer belonged to her as it once had. Ever since her only son, Ronald Montgomery, married Beatrice, the family dynamic had changed. Not that Cecilia disliked her daughter-in-law. There was something about Beatrice that shone, that attracted everyone like moths to a flame. But over the years, Cecilia had begun to realize that not all brilliance comes from a genuine source. "Mrs. Cecilia, do you need anything?" The voice of Josephine, the housekeeper who had been with her for over 3 decades, interrupted her thoughts. "No, Josephine. I'm fine, just observing. Mrs. Beatrice asked if you would come down for the cocktail tasting. The journalists arrive in 2 hours." Cecilia smiled, though the gesture didn't reach her eyes. "Tell my daughter-in-law I'll be there in 15 minutes. When Josephine left, Cecilia turned to the mirror. Time had been kind to her. Her white hair, always impeccably styled, framed a face that, despite the wrinkles, maintained a serene dignity. Her eyes, however, carried a restlessness that had only grown in recent months. Downstairs, Beatrice Montgomery coordinated a small team of professionals, organizing the launch of the Montgomery Foundation's newest project. At 38 years old, she was considered a model modern woman. Businesswoman, philanthropist, and wife of the heir to one of the country's largest business groups. That day, she wore a red dress that contrasted with her fair skin and carefully styled black hair. "I want the photos of the Brixton Hill community to be clearly visible at the entrance," she instructed the designer, and placed the results graphs next to them. "The numbers are impressive." "Yes, madam," replied the young man as he arranged the panels. Beatrice checked her wristwatch, a discreet piece of jewelry, yet costing more than many cars. Her husband was due to arrive any moment. Ronald had spent the morning in meetings at the company headquarters, negotiating the acquisition of a smaller competitor. The thought made her smile. More power, more resources for the foundation, more visibility. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Cecilia's arrival. Beatrice immediately widened her smile, approaching her mother-in-law with open arms. "Cecilia, so glad you came down. Come see how the decoration turned out. I'm sure you'll love it." The matriarch returned the hug more out of politeness than affection. "It's all very beautiful, Beatrice. As always. The new project will revolutionize the lives of hundreds of families," Beatrice continued, as she guided her mother-in-law through the hall. "We are building a professional training center in Brixton Hill. Women will be able to learn sewing, crafts, cooking, all with certification so they can enter the formal job market." Cecilia nodded, observing the panels with photos of smiling children and working women. Something about those images bothered her, but she couldn't pinpoint what. "And when does the project actually begin?" she asked. An almost imperceptible shadow crossed Beatrice's face. "We are in the final fundraising phase. With today's event, we should finalize the necessary partnerships to start in 2 months. I thought we already had the resources approved by the Foundation's board." "Yes. But we need operational partners," Beatrice quickly replied. "Oh, look. The canapes have arrived. Come try them. I chose them especially with your palate in mind." The conversation was diverted, as always happened when Cecilia tried to delve into the project details. As she distractedly sampled one of the savory snacks offered, her gaze met Josephine's, who was arranging glasses. The housekeeper knew that worried expression on her employer's face all too well. The sound of the main door opening announced Ronald's arrival. Tall with an athletic build at 45 years old, he entered the hall bringing with him the typical confidence of someone who had always had everything. He kissed his wife, hugged his mother, and paused to admire the decor. "Impressive as always, darling," he told Beatrice. "The press will love it." "I did everything thinking about the foundation's visibility," she replied, adjusting her husband's tie. The Minister of Education confirmed attendance. Imagine the repercussion. Cecilia observed the couple's interaction with a knot in her stomach. Ronald saw only what Beatrice wanted to show. He was a good man, hard-working, honest, but completely blinded by the admiration he felt for his wife. Since the beginning of their marriage 10 years ago, he had gradually transferred control of the foundation created by his parents to Beatrice. "Mother, are you well?" Ronald asked, noticing her silence. "I am, son. Just a little tired." "You should rest before the journalists arrive," Beatrice suggested with a solicitous smile. "Would you like me to ask Josephine to prepare some tea?" "It's not necessary. I'll just touch up my makeup." As she ascended the stairs again, Cecilia felt Beatrice's gaze on her back. The tension between the two had been increasing in recent weeks, ever since Cecilia had begun to more openly question some of the foundation's figures that didn't make sense. Upstairs, instead of going to her room, Cecilia silently entered the office that once belonged to her deceased husband and was now used by Beatrice to manage the foundation. The door was unlocked, a rare oversight from her daughter-in-law, always so careful. Perhaps the hustle and bustle of event preparations had made Beatrice forget her secrets for a moment. Cecilia looked at the organized folders on the shelves, at the open laptop on the desk, at the framed pictures on the wall showing Beatrice alongside politicians and celebrities. Something was wrong there, she could feel it. Like an out-of-tune melody in a perfect concert, like a loose thread in a meticulously woven tapestry. The sound of the telephone startled her. It was the device on Beatrice's desk. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. After a few rings, the call went to voicemail, and a muffled male voice sounded in the silent room. "Beatrice, it's me again. We need to sort out this land situation. The residents are asking about the training center you promised, and I don't know what else to invent. Call me urgently." Cecilia's heart quickened. Her suspicions were beginning to take shape. Driven by an impulse, she opened the desk drawer and found a red folder marked Confidential. Inside, spreadsheets and documents showed donation values, names of partner companies, and ongoing projects. A noise in the corridor made her quickly put the folder back in the drawer. She left the office and silently closed the door, seconds before Beatrice appeared at the top of the stairs. "Cecilia, I thought you were in your room," Beatrice said, with an expression that mixed surprise and suspicion. "I was just heading there now," the elderly woman replied, maintaining her composure. "I just stopped to admire the photos in the hallway. So many memories." "Yes, family history is very important," Beatrice agreed, approaching. "That's why I dedicate myself so much to the foundation, to honor the Montgomery legacy." The two women stared at each other for a moment, each hiding their true thoughts behind rehearsed smiles. The air between them seemed charged with electricity. "The journalists have started to arrive," Beatrice finally said. "We should go down in 15 minutes. "I'll be ready," Cecilia replied. As she walked to her room, Cecilia felt a chill run down her spine. A certainty grew within her. She needed to discover what was truly happening with the Montgomery Foundation, even if it meant confronting the daughter-in-law her son loved so much. The truth, however painful, needed to come to light. The launch event for the Montgomery Foundation's new project was an absolute success. Journalists photographed incessantly as Beatrice spoke about social inclusion and opportunities for vulnerable women. Beside her, Ronald smiled proudly. Cecilia, seated in the front row, maintained the elegant posture that characterized her, but her mind seethed with suspicions that had intensified after hearing that message in the office. 3 days later, the estate had returned to its usual routine. In the living room, Cecilia distractedly leafed through a magazine while listening to Beatrice on the phone in the next room. Her voice alternated between irritated whispers and tense pauses. "I don't care what they're saying. You were hired to solve these problems," Beatrice spoke in a low but firm tone. "If that community keeps complaining, we'll shift focus to another neighborhood. London has dozens of deprived areas." Cecilia's heart raced. Every word confirmed her suspicions. When the phone was hung up, she quickly turned her attention back to the magazine, feigning disinterest. Beatrice entered the room adjusting her hair, as if she had just had a trivial conversation. "Cecilia, good to find you. I have a meeting now, but I wanted to let you know I'll be absent from dinner. Foundation matters." "Of course. Dear, any problems with the new project?" Beatrice's gaze hardened for a fraction of a second, but her usual smile quickly returned. "Nothing important. Just some operational adjustments. Bureaucracy is always a challenge when it comes to social projects." After Beatrice left, Cecilia waited a few minutes and went to the kitchen, where Josephine was preparing lunch. "Josephine, do you know Beatrice's driver, Claude?" The housekeeper looked up from the carrot she was cutting. "Yes, I do, Mrs. Cecilia. He's a reserved but polite young man. He's been with the family for about 2 years. Does he usually comment on the places he takes my daughter-in-law?" Josephine seemed uncomfortable with the question. She looked around to make sure they were alone. "Not much, madam. But yesterday he seemed nervous. He mentioned something about not liking to go to that place in Brixton Hill. He said the residents stare at the car as if he and Mrs. Beatrice were aliens." "Interesting. And do you know if she's actually building a training center there, as she announced?" "Well," Josephine hesitated. "Claude mentioned that they visit the place a lot, but he never saw any construction. He said Mrs. Beatrice just takes photos and talks to a few people. But you know how it is. Staff sometimes talk too much." Cecilia nodded, processing the information. "Thank you, Josephine. And if Beatrice asks, we haven't talked about this." Determined to investigate further, Cecilia waited for the right moment. The next morning, when Beatrice left for a charity breakfast and Ronald had already departed for the office, she asked Claude to take her to the shopping centre. The driver, a middle-aged man with a permanently worried expression, readily agreed. During the drive, Cecilia initiated a casual conversation. "Claude, your job must be interesting, getting to know so many different places in the city." "Yes, Mrs. Cecilia," he replied, without taking his eyes off the road. "My daughter-in-law told me that the project in Brixton Hill is progressing well. You've been taking her there frequently, haven't you?" The driver adjusted the rearview mirror, visibly uncomfortable. "Yes, madam. It must be rewarding to see the training centre taking shape." There was a moment of silence. Claude cleared his throat. "Mrs. Cecilia, with all due respect, there's no centre being built there." Cecilia felt a tightening in her chest but maintained her composure. "What do you mean?" "It's just an empty plot of land with a foundation sign. Mrs. Beatrice goes there, takes photos with some local leaders, distributes food baskets occasionally. But actual construction, I've never seen any." "I see," Cecilia murmured, looking out the car window to hide her expression. "And the Foundation's other projects? The elderly shelter in Islington? The daycare in Tower Hamlets?" Claude swallowed hard. "Madam, I don't know if I should be saying this, but they're all like that. Signs, promises, some isolated actions for photos. Nothing permanent. Why did you never say anything?" "I need this job, Mrs. Cecilia," he replied with a tremor in his voice. "I have 2 children in college. Don't worry, Claude. This conversation stays between us. Actually, I've changed my mind about the shopping centre. Could you take me to Brixton Hill? I want to see this land with my own eyes." The driver hesitated. "Mrs. Beatrice wouldn't like that." "I'll take responsibility. Say I insisted." Reluctantly, Claude changed the route. After almost an hour's drive, passing through increasingly simple areas of the city, they arrived at a peripheral neighborhood where humble houses clustered on narrow streets. The luxury car stood out completely from the environment, attracting curious glances. Claude parked in front of a fenced plot of land. A faded sign announced, "Future Professional Training Center, Montgomery Foundation." The space, covered in tall weeds and debris, clearly housed no ongoing construction. "It's here, Mrs. Cecilia." The elderly woman got out of the car, ignoring Claude's protests about her safety. She approached the fence and observed the abandoned land. A woman sweeping the sidewalk of the neighboring house noticed her. "Are you from the foundation?" she asked, approaching. In a way, yes, Cecilia replied. What can you tell me about this project? The woman let out a bitter laugh. Project? That's just empty talk. That beautiful lady comes here, promises the moon and stars, hands out some food baskets when reporters are around, and then disappears. It's been 2 years since they put up that sign and no training center. Cecilia felt her face burn with shame. Her family's name was being used in a farce. What's your name, madam? Mariana. I'm the president of the Residents' Association. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Mariana. My name is Cecilia Montgomery. The woman's eyes widened in recognition. You're that businessman's mother. I am. And I'd like to understand better what happened here. Can we talk? Over the next hour, Cecilia heard accounts that confirmed her worst suspicions. The Montgomery Foundation had made grand promises to the community, but had delivered only crumbs. Beatrice used the location for photo shoots and interviews, creating an image of philanthropy that did not match reality. On the way back to the estate, Cecilia remained silent, digesting what she had discovered. She needed to confront Beatrice, but knew it would be a difficult conversation. Even harder would be telling the truth to Ronald, who idolized his wife. When they arrived, they found Beatrice's car at the entrance. Cecilia felt her stomach drop. She hadn't expected her daughter-in-law to return so soon. Thank you, Claude. Remember, our conversation stays between us, he finished nervously. Upon entering the estate, Cecilia found Beatrice in the hall with a furious expression. Where were you? Beatrice asked, dispensing with any greeting. I went for a drive, Cecilia replied calmly. In Brixton Hill. Beatrice's eyes sparked. Josephine told me you went out with Claude, and someone from the community called me saying they saw Dr. Ronald's mother-in-law there. What were you doing? Getting to know the reality of the Foundation's projects that bear my family's name, Cecilia replied, keeping her voice firm despite her racing heart. And what I found has left me deeply disappointed. Beatrice paled but quickly regained her composure. You don't understand modern social projects. We are in the participatory planning phase, listening to the community before starting construction. For 2 years, while announcing to the press that the project is in full operation? Cecilia shook her head. Don't take me for a fool, Beatrice. I've seen the inflated reports, heard the call recordings. I know you're using the Foundation to promote yourself without genuinely helping those in need. For a moment, Beatrice seemed cornered. Then a transformation occurred on her face. The artificial smile gave way to a cold, calculating expression that Cecilia had never seen before. And what do you intend to do with that information? Tell Ronald? He would never believe it. To him, I am perfect. Beatrice took a step forward, invading Cecilia's personal space. Do you know why the Foundation was dying when I took over? Because you traditional Montgomerys never understood that charity is also marketing. I transformed a small family project into a powerhouse of visibility. At the expense of vulnerable people who truly need help, Cecilia retorted. Those people get food baskets and attention. It's more than they had before. Beatrice adjusted her impeccable blazer. You have 2 options. Stay quiet and continue enjoying the comfort my work provides, or create a scandal that will destroy the family's reputation and break your son's heart. Before Cecilia could reply, Beatrice's phone rang. It was Ronald. She answered with a sweet voice that completely contrasted with her coldness of seconds before. Hi, love. Yes, I'm home with your mother. Beatrice smiled at Cecilia, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're discussing the Foundation's upcoming projects. She has wonderful ideas. Upon hanging up, Beatrice maintained the artificial smile. Ronald is bringing an important client for dinner. I suggest you rest and prepare to be the perfect hostess you always have been. And, of course, keep our disagreements private. With that, Beatrice ascended the stairs, leaving Cecilia alone in the hall, trembling with indignation. The matriarch now realized the magnitude of the problem she faced. It wasn't just a matter of vanity or ambition. Beatrice had built such an elaborate web of lies that dismantling it would affect the entire family. Cecilia slowly went up to her room, feeling the weight of years and worries. She needed to think carefully about the next step. Confronting Beatrice publicly would be a disaster for everyone, but allowing the charade to continue was unacceptable. Sitting in her favorite armchair, looking out at the garden through the window, Cecilia made a decision. She couldn't count on Ronald's help, Blinded as he was by his adoration for his wife, she would need to act alone, gathering concrete evidence before any definitive confrontation. What she didn't know was that Beatrice was already several steps ahead, planning a way to permanently silence the one who threatened her empire of appearances. Dinner with the important client proceeded exactly as Beatrice had planned. Cecilia, always impeccable in her role as hostess, did not betray the internal turmoil consuming her. Ronald, absorbed in negotiations, barely noticed the veiled tension between his wife and mother. The smiles were mechanical, the words measured, and the glances exchanged between the two women carried silent promises of a battle that was just beginning. The next morning, Cecilia woke up determined. During breakfast, she observed her son and daughter-in-law discussing the day's commitments. The intimacy between them made her hesitate. Ronald seemed genuinely happy, proud of the philanthropist wife who had built an empire of good reputation by his side. Would it be fair to destroy that illusion? "Mother, are you well?" Ronald's voice brought her back to reality. "You seem distant." "I'm perfectly fine, son. Just thinking about my day." "Any special engagements?" Beatrice asked with feigned interest. "Actually, yes. I was thinking of visiting the Foundation's headquarters. It's been a while since I've seen how things are going there." Beatrice's fork made a sharp clatter as it hit the plate. "The headquarters is under renovation, Cecilia. It's not a good time for visits." "Renovation? I don't recall Ronald mentioning anything about that." "It's a small project, Mother," Ronald intervened. "Beatrice is modernizing some spaces to improve services. Nothing major." "I see." Cecilia took a sip of coffee, hiding her disbelief behind the cup. Another lie for the list. After breakfast, Ronald left for the office, leaving the two women alone. The silence hung heavy for a few moments, until Beatrice broke it with an unexpected proposal. "Cecilia, I've been thinking. You're right to want to know more about the Foundation's projects. In fact, we have a visit scheduled for tomorrow to a new location we're evaluating in Kent Downs. It would be an honor to have your company and opinion." The change in Beatrice's tone surprised the matriarch. "Kent Downs? That's quite far. Precisely why we need your experience. It's a deprived area that could greatly benefit from our work." "What do you think?" Cecilia analyzed her daughter-in-law's face, looking for signs of falsehood. Beatrice's smile seemed sincere, but her eyes retained that calculating coldness the elderly woman had learned to recognize. "All right," she finally agreed. "I'll go with you tomorrow." "Great. We'll leave early, around 7. It's a long journey." Throughout the rest of the day, Cecilia remained alert. Something about Beatrice's sudden amiability deeply bothered her. That night she called Josephine to her room. "I need you to do me a favor, Josephine. Tomorrow, if Ronald asks for me, say I went with Beatrice to visit a foundation project in Kent Downs." "Yes, madame. And one more thing, if I don't return by late afternoon, call this number." Cecilia handed her a paper with Mariana's phone number, the community leader from Brixton Hill. "Say I'm with Beatrice and I need help." The housekeeper frowned, worried. "Mrs. Cecilia, are you in danger?" "Probably not," the elderly woman replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "It's just a precaution." The next morning, promptly at 7 o'clock, Beatrice was already waiting in the car with Claude at the wheel. She wore an expensive but discreet pantsuit and blazer, her country attire, as she herself defined it with a smile. Cecilia, in turn, opted for a simple and comfortable look, suitable for a visit to a peripheral area. "Good morning, Cecilia. Ready for our adventure?" "Perfectly ready," the matriarch replied, settling into the back seat. As the car drove through the streets of London, Cecilia noticed that Claude seemed more tense than usual. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror occasionally, as if he wanted to communicate something. Beatrice, on the other hand, was unusually talkative, detailing ambitious plans for the supposed new project. It will be a rehabilitation center for at-risk youth. Vocational courses, occupational therapy, sports. A complete project. "Sounds grand," Cecilia commented. "What's the estimated budget?" "We're finalizing the numbers," Beatrice replied vaguely. "But we have several interested sponsors." The journey to Kent Downs, in the far south of the county, took almost 2 hours. As they drove, the buildings became more sparse, giving way to greener, more isolated areas. Finally, Claude turned onto a dirt road. "Are we there?" Cecilia asked, looking out the window at the trees lining the path. "Almost," Beatrice replied. "The land is a little further ahead. It's an isolated area, perfect for the kind of work we intend to develop." After a few more minutes, the car stopped in front of a clearing. There was no foundation sign, nor any sign of preparation for a social project, just tall weeds and a few trees. Beatrice got out of the vehicle and invited Cecilia to do the same. "I don't see anything here." "Beatrice," the elderly woman commented, looking around. "That's because we're still in the initial evaluation phase," Beatrice explained, walking through the undergrowth. "Come, I want to show you the boundaries of the land." Cecilia followed her, feeling a mixture of distrust and curiosity. As they walked, Beatrice pointed to imaginary places. "There will be the main building. Over there, the dormitories, yonder the sports area." Her voice sounded mechanical, as if reciting a memorized text without conviction. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at a small abandoned building, a kind of shed with deteriorated wooden walls and a partially destroyed roof. "What is this place?" Cecilia asked. "It was an old environmental inspection post," Beatrice replied. "We intend to incorporate it into the project, transforming it into a study center on the preservation of the Atlantic forest." Beatrice opened the creaking door and gestured for Cecilia to enter. The interior was dark and dusty, with a few broken pieces of furniture scattered on the floor. The smell of mold was intense. "It doesn't seem like a suitable place to me," Cecilia commented, taking a few hesitant steps inside the structure. "Perhaps it would be better to demolish it and build something new." "Perhaps," Beatrice agreed, remaining near the door. "But first we need to solve another problem." Something in Beatrice's voice made Cecilia turn quickly. Her daughter-in-law's expression had completely changed. The cordial smile had given way to a cold, determined look. "What problem?" Cecilia asked, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "You, Cecilia, you are the problem." Beatrice crossed her arms. "Your meddling in the Foundation's affairs is threatening everything I've built, and I cannot allow that. What do you intend to do? Keep me here? For a few hours, yes. Enough for me to resolve the situation." At that moment, Claude appeared at the door carrying a bag. His face was pale and his hands trembled slightly. "Leave the food and water, Claude." "And the ropes," Beatrice ordered. "Mrs. Beatrice, this wasn't part of the agreement," he protested hesitantly. "You said it would just be a conversation, and it will be, but I need to ensure my dear mother-in-law is comfortably settled while I sort out some details in London." Beatrice extended her hand. "The ropes, Claude." The visibly disturbed driver handed over a roll of nylon rope. Beatrice smiled at Cecilia. "Nothing personal, Cecilia. It's just business. You'll stay here for a few hours, well-fed and hydrated. When I return, we'll discuss your future at the estate and the Foundation." "You won't get away with this, Beatrice," Cecilia said, keeping her voice firm despite her growing fear. "Ronald will notice my absence. Ronald thinks you're visiting a friend in the countryside. I told him myself last night, and you know how much he trusts me." Beatrice approached, holding the rope. "And now be a good mother-in-law and sit in that chair." Cecilia looked around, assessing her chances. She was a 75-year-old woman against a 38-year-old in peak physical condition. The door was blocked by Claude, who seemed as frightened as she was. There were no windows through which she could escape, only small cracks in the rotten wood. "Claude, are you going to allow this?" Cecilia asked, appealing to the driver. "What she's doing is a crime." The man looked away, ashamed. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Cecilia." "He has a family to support," Beatrice explained coldly, "and I pay very well for loyalty. Now sit down." With reluctance, Cecilia obeyed. Beatrice tied her hands and feet to the chair with surprising efficiency. It wasn't tight enough to hurt, but enough to prevent any movement. "There," Beatrice said, checking the knots. "It's not so bad, is it? The food and water are within reach, and I'll be back before nightfall. Until then, feel free to reflect on your position in the family." "Why, Beatrice?" Cecilia asked, looking directly into her daughter-in-law's eyes. "Why all this charade? You already have money, prestige, my son. What more do you want?" For a moment, something akin to vulnerability crossed Beatrice's face. "You wouldn't understand. You never had to prove your worth. You were born a Montgomery, grew up in mansions, had everything effortlessly. I came from nothing, Cecilia. Every inch of respect I gained was at the cost of a lot of hard work and planning, at the cost of lies and manipulation. Call it what you will, This world doesn't reward honesty, it rewards image. And I built a perfect image. Beatrice adjusted her blazer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a press conference to announce the expansion of the Montgomery Foundation's projects. I'll be back around 6. She signaled to Claude, who followed her out, casting a last guilty glance at Cecilia. The door was closed, leaving the elderly woman alone in the abandoned structure. The silence of the place was broken only by the distant sounds of the woods and the accelerated beating of her own heart. Cecilia took a deep breath, trying to control the panic. She needed to stay calm and think. The ropes weren't too tight. Perhaps with time and patience she could free herself. Or perhaps Josephine would notice her prolonged absence and call Mariana's number as arranged. Meanwhile, in the car returning to London, the silence was heavy between Beatrice and Claude. It was the driver who finally broke it. "What's going to happen to Mrs. Cecilia?" "Nothing serious," Beatrice replied, checking messages on her phone. "She'll stay there for a few hours. I'll return. We'll have a civilized conversation and we'll reach an agreement. And if she doesn't agree to your terms?" Beatrice looked up, staring at Claude through the rearview mirror. "Everyone has a price, Claude. Hers might be her son's happiness. I'm sure she wouldn't risk destroying Ronald's marriage. And if someone finds out, that place is isolated, but it's not completely abandoned. There are fishermen, forest rangers." "That's why we'll be back before nightfall," Beatrice cut in, irritated. "And that's also why you'll be very well rewarded for your silence. Do we understand each other?" Claude nodded, swallowing the guilt that rose like bile in his throat. The rest of the journey passed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Beatrice planned the next steps of her strategy, while Claude struggled against the growing feeling that he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. At the estate, Josephine looked at the clock with concern. It was already past noon, and there was no news from Mrs. Cecilia. Ronald had called to say he would have lunch at the office, and Beatrice had sent a message saying she would be busy all day with foundation matters. The housekeeper hesitated between following her employer's instructions, calling that unknown number, or waiting a few more hours. In the abandoned shed, Cecilia patiently worked to loosen the ropes binding her wrists. A ray of sunlight entered through a crack in the roof, illuminating the dust suspended in the air. The hours dragged slowly, but the matriarch's determination did not wane. Of one thing she was certain. When she got out of there, the truth about Beatrice Montgomery would come to light, no matter the cost. At 4 in the afternoon, Josephine finally gave in to her unease. Something wasn't right. Mrs. Cecilia would never go so many hours without news, especially on a visit to a distant place with Beatrice, with whom relations had clearly been tense in recent days. The housekeeper took the paper with the phone number from her apron pocket and after a brief hesitation dialed. "Hello?" The female voice on the other end sounded suspicious. "Good afternoon. I'm trying to reach Mrs. Mariana." "That's me." "Who's calling?" "My name is Josephine. I'm the housekeeper at the Montgomery family home. Mrs. Cecilia asked me to call if she didn't return by late afternoon from a visit with Mrs. Beatrice." There was a moment of silence on the line. When Mariana spoke again, her voice was laden with concern. "Mrs. Cecilia was here in Brixton Hill a few days ago. We talked about that foundation that does nothing but take pictures. She seemed determined to resolve the situation." Mariana paused. "You said she went out with her daughter-in-law?" "That high-heeled woman who thinks she owns the world?" "Yes, they went to visit a plot of land in Kent Downs for a new foundation project." "In Kent Downs? That's strange. My brother works there, knows every bit of that region, and never mentioned anything about new social projects." Mariana took a deep breath. "Look, I don't want to alarm anyone, but that woman's expression when she was here wasn't good. She seemed fake, you know? Like a snake about to strike." Josephine felt her heart race. Her suspicions gained strength. "What should we do?" "Can't you talk to her son?" "The businessman? Dr. Ronald is in a meeting. And honestly, I doubt he'd believe anything against his wife." "I see." Mariana seemed to think for a moment. "Listen, I have a cousin who's a ride-share driver. He knows the Kent Downs area well. I can ask him to take a look, see if he finds the car or any sign of them. That would be great. Mrs. Cecilia went in a black Mercedes with a driver. License plate ending in 237. I'll talk to him right away. Write down my cell number so we can stay in touch." Meanwhile, in the abandoned shed, Cecilia had managed to partially loosen the ropes binding her wrists. The process was slow and painful. The skin of her hands, thin and sensitive due to age, already showed red marks from the effort. But the matriarch's determination was greater than the physical pain. "You won't win, Beatrice," she murmured to herself, like a mantra that gave her strength. "Not this time." An external noise made her stop. Footsteps approached. Quickly, Cecilia readjusted the ropes so they appeared intact and assumed a posture of exhaustion. The door opened and she expected to see Beatrice, but instead Claude entered. The driver looked around nervously before approaching. "Mrs. Cecilia, are you all right?" "What do you think, Claude?" she replied, with an unusual coolness in her usually gentle voice. "I've been tied up in an abandoned shed for hours, betrayed by people I trusted." The man lowered his eyes, ashamed. I shouldn't have let this happen." "But you did, and now? Did you come to finish the job, or has your conscience finally caught up?" Claude took a pocket knife from his pocket. "I came to get you out of here. I can't be part of this anymore." As he cut the ropes, he explained his change of heart. "Mrs. Beatrice is at a press conference, announcing new foundation projects. She said she'd come for you at 6, but I realized her intentions are more serious than she admitted." "What did you hear, Claude?" Cecilia asked, massaging her now free wrists. "She called a broker, asking about transferring the ownership of a house in Oxford to her name. She said she needed to install someone from the family there, away from London. She intends to permanently remove me from Ronald," Cecilia concluded. "Exactly. You wouldn't just be here for a few hours. You would be taken to Oxford and kept isolated, while she told everyone you had decided to move there for more tranquility." Cecilia stood up, feeling her legs weak after hours of immobilization. "We need to get out of here and reach the city before she does. Ronald needs to know the truth. My car is hidden on the secondary road, a 15-minute walk." Claude offered support to help her steady herself. "Can you walk, Mrs. Cecilia?" "Certainly." A Montgomery doesn't give up easily. They began to walk through the woods, slowly due to Cecilia's physical condition. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground covered with dry leaves. After a few minutes, they heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. "Quick! We need to hide," Claude whispered, pulling Cecilia behind a cluster of bushes. An unknown car slowly passed on the main road, slowing down as it approached the shed. A man got out and looked around as if searching for something. "Who is that?" Cecilia asked. "I have no idea," Claude replied, tense. The man approached the shed, peered through the broken window, and then opened the door. A few seconds later, he hurried out, pulled out his cell phone, and made a call. "Mariana, it's me, Gilbert. I found the place you described, but there's no one here. Just a chair with cut ropes. Looks like someone was tied up but managed to escape." Cecilia and Claude exchanged surprised glances. Before they could decide what to do, the man continued. "I'll keep looking around. If it's the elderly lady, she can't have gone far." Cecilia made an immediate decision. She stepped out of hiding, despite Claude's silent protests, and called out, "I'm here. Are you related to Mariana from Brixton Hill?" The man turned, startled. "Mrs. Cecilia Montgomery. Thank goodness. Yes, Mariana is my cousin. Your housekeeper called, worried, and we're looking for you." Josephine called. Cecilia felt a wave of gratitude for her employee's loyalty. "Yes, she followed your instructions. Mariana organized a search. We have 3 cars driving around the area." Claude hesitantly emerged from behind the bushes, keeping his distance. "And who is this?" Gilbert asked suspiciously. "The driver who brought me here," Cecilia explained. "He was following orders but decided to help me." Gilbert didn't seem convinced but nodded. "The important thing is that we found you. Come on, my car is nearby. We can take you back to London." "No," Cecilia replied, surprising everyone. "We need to go to the Foundation headquarters first. Beatrice's press conference must be happening now. Hey, it's the perfect time to confront her publicly." "Mrs. Cecilia," Claude intervened, "you've been through a lot today. Wouldn't it be better to rest and plan this confrontation better?" "There's no time for rest, Claude. If we don't act now, Beatrice will have time to concoct more lies. We need to catch her off guard in front of the very people she tries to impress with her falsehoods." Gilbert smiled, admiring the elderly woman's determination. "You are courageous. Let's go then, my car is fast." During the journey back to London, Cecilia called Josephine, reassuring her. and asking her not to mention anything to Ronald yet. He needs to see the truth with his own eyes, she explained. She also asked Gilbert to call Mariana. Ask her to gather as many Brixton Hill residents as possible and go to the Foundation headquarters. They are the true victims of Beatrice's lies. Their voices need to be heard. As the car cut through the congested avenues of the capital city, Cecilia mentally prepared for the confrontation. It wouldn't be easy to expose her daughter-in-law, especially in front of Ronald. She knew her son would be devastated, but the truth, however painful, was necessary. "We're here," Gilbert announced, parking in front of a modern building in the neighborhood of Kensington, where the Montgomery Foundation headquarters was located. Several press cars were parked out front, indicating that the conference was still ongoing. Cecilia tidied her hair and adjusted her wrinkled clothes as best she could. "How do I look?" she asked Claude. "Like a warrior, Mrs. Cecilia," she smiled, touched by the comment. "Let's go, then." In the Foundation's auditorium, Beatrice was radiant. Wearing an elegant navy blue suit, she presented slides with images of social projects, many of which existed only on paper. Beside her, on a panel, sat businessmen and politicians who financially supported the Foundation, attracted by the impeccable image of its executive director. And thus, she concluded, the Brixton Hill Training Center has already impacted over 200 families, creating a new paradigm of sustainable community development. Journalists eagerly wrote everything down, while photographers captured every smile, every studied gesture of Beatrice. The audience, composed of entrepreneurs and socialites, politely applauded each new project announced. "Any questions?" Beatrice offered, confident she controlled the narrative. A journalist raised her hand. "When can we visit this center in Brixton Hill? It would be interesting to do a special report on the local impact." For a fraction of a second, Beatrice's expression wavered. "So of course we are organizing a guided press visit in the coming weeks. My press office will contact you with the details." It was at that moment that the auditorium doors opened, and Cecilia entered, followed by Claude and Gilbert. A murmur ran through the audience. Beatrice froze upon seeing her mother-in-law, who should have been tied up in an abandoned shed kilometers away. "Excuse the interruption," Cecilia said, with a clear and firm voice despite her exhaustion. "But I believe I have some relevant information about the Montgomery Foundation's projects that everyone here should know." Beatrice quickly tried to regain control of the situation. "Cecilia, what a wonderful surprise. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cecilia Montgomery, my husband's mother and the original founder of this institution." She stepped down from the stage and approached her mother-in-law, whispering through gritted teeth, "What do you think you're doing?" "Revealing the truth," Cecilia replied, pulling away from her daughter-in-law's touch. Before Beatrice could stop her, Cecilia walked to the center of the auditorium. "I would like to invite everyone present to make an immediate visit to the so-called Brixton Hill Training Center. You will be surprised to discover that it does not exist. It is merely an empty plot of land with a faded sign." A heavy silence fell over the room. Beatrice, pale, tried to intervene. "My mother-in-law is confused. Tage, you know how it is. She's referring to the initial phase of the project, when we didn't yet have the complete facilities." "I am not confused, Beatrice, and I have proof." Cecilia signaled to Gilbert, who approached with his cell phone. "This is Gilbert, Mariana's cousin, president of the Brixton Hill Residents Association, and he has something to show." Gilbert connected his phone to the projector. On the screen, recent photos of the abandoned plot where the training center was supposedly operating appeared. More murmurs ran through the auditorium. "And that's not all," Cecilia continued. "Most of the projects announced by my daughter-in-law are fictitious. She has been using the Montgomery Foundation as a personal platform, creating a public image based on lies." At that moment, the auditorium doors opened again. Ronald entered, accompanied by Josephine and a group of Brixton Hill residents led by Mariana. His face showed confusion and concern. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from Cecilia to Beatrice. "Mother, Josephine told me you were missing, and now I find you here accusing Beatrice? So your husband arrived just in time," Gilbert whispered to Cecilia. "Yes," she replied with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Now comes the hardest part." The Montgomery Foundation auditorium transformed into a stage of palpable tension. On one side, Beatrice, visibly destabilized but still trying to maintain her composure. On the other, Cecilia, exhausted yet determined, sustained by an inner strength that surprised everyone. And between them, Ronald, confused and stunned by the scene unfolding before his eyes. "Can someone explain to me what's happening?" he insisted, his voice rising slightly. The journalists present had already pulled out their cell phones, recording every moment of that unexpected family drama. Beatrice was the first to react, approaching her husband with her best semblance of concern. "Darling, your mother isn't well. I think she's confused, mixing up facts." "I am perfectly lucid, Ronald," Cecilia interrupted, stepping forward, "and I have evidence for what I'm saying." She gestured to Mariana and the other Brixton Hill residents. "These people can confirm that the training center your wife just announced as a success doesn't even exist." Mariana stepped forward, her initial nervousness giving way to indignation. "Your name, your company, and your foundation are used to deceive us, Doctor. 2 years ago, a sign was put up in our neighborhood, promising a center that never materialized. Your wife appears occasionally, takes photos, distributes some food baskets when journalists are present, and then disappears. Meanwhile, she uses our community in presentations like this." Ronald looked at Beatrice, disbelief etched on his face. "Is this true?" Beatrice feigned a confident smile. "Of course not, love. There's an implementation schedule, bureaucratic issues that delayed the project, but enough with the lies." Cecilia's voice echoed through the auditorium with an authority that silenced everyone. "Earlier today, when I discovered what was happening, your wife took me to an abandoned shed in Kent Downs, tied me to a chair, and left me there, alone." A murmur of astonishment ran through the auditorium. Beatrice paled completely, her eyes frantically searching for an exit. "This is absurd, Ronald. Your mother is making things up." "Why would I do something like that?" "To prevent me from revealing that you are using the Montgomery Foundation as a personal platform," Cecilia calmly replied. "There are no real projects, just facades. The donations received are used to maintain your public image, not to help those in need." The silence that followed was deafening. Journalists no longer disguised that they were recording everything, while partner businessmen exchanged worried glances. Ronald seemed to have been hit by a physical blow. "Beatrice," his voice came out as a strangled whisper, "tell me this isn't true." It was Claude who intervened, surprising everyone. "It's true, Dr. Ronald. I myself took your mother to the shed following Mrs. Beatrice's orders. She was left there tied up, and the plan was to permanently transfer her to an isolated house in Oxford, away from you and everyone else." Beatrice shot a furious glance at the driver. "You too, Claude? After everything I've done for you and your family?" "Precisely because of my family," he replied, holding her gaze. "What kind of example would I set for my children by being an accomplice to this? What I've done so far is enough." Ronald seemed to be in shock. His world was crumbling before his eyes. The wife he idolized, to whom he had entrusted not only his heart but also his family's legacy, revealed herself to be an imposter. "I want to see," he finally said, his voice firm despite the almost imperceptible tremor. "I want to see that shed in Kent Downs. I want to visit the supposed center in Brixton Hill. I want to verify every project we announced." "Now?" Beatrice asked, incredulous. "Right now." Ronald turned to the journalists. "The press conference is suspended. The Montgomery Foundation is under audit as of this moment." One of the businessmen on the panel stood up. "Ronald, let's talk in private. This is a family matter. We don't need to expose it." "No, Paul, this is not just a family matter. It's about integrity, about the use of my family's name and the donations you and other partners made in good faith." Ronald took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "I apologize to everyone. The foundation will suspend its activities until everything is clarified." Beatrice, seeing her empire crumble, completely changed her strategy. The tears that began to stream down her face seemed genuine, or at least the result of years of practice in emotional manipulation. "Ronald, I can explain everything. I did what I did for our family, for our future. Yes, I exaggerated some numbers, brought forward some announcements, but the intention was always good." She approached, trying to touch him. "As for your mother, it was a misunderstanding. I just wanted to buy time to organize everything before she exposed me like this." Ronald recoiled, avoiding her touch. Buy time by tying my 75-year-old mother in an abandoned shed. That's not a misunderstanding, Beatrice. It's... He paused as if he couldn't find words to define the act. We're going to verify everything now, he insisted. Mother, are you well enough to come with us? Cecilia nodded. I am. But first, she turned to the journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to accompany us in this verification. The public deserves to know the truth about how their donations were used. Beatrice shot a look of pure hatred at her mother-in-law, but quickly composed herself, realizing she was surrounded. One last card needed to be played. All right, she said, surprising everyone with her sudden docility. Let's verify together. I made mistakes, I admit. Perhaps I was too ambitious. Perhaps I lost focus on what truly mattered. She looked at Ronald with pleading eyes. But I did it for us, for our image. Please, at least, believe that. The group left the auditorium in a tense procession. Newscars followed the convoy led by Ronald's vehicle, where Cecilia occupied the passenger seat and Beatrice, relegated to the back seat, maintained a calculated silence. Claude drove, while Mariana and other residents followed in separate vehicles. The first stop was the plot of land in Brixton Hill. Before the cameras, Ronald contemplated the empty space where the training center, which his wife had just presented as a success story, was supposed to operate. The faded sign, partially covered by tall weeds, was the only evidence that the location had any connection to the Montgomery Foundation. How much was allocated for this project? He asked, his voice low and controlled. £2,700,000, according to the last report presented to the board, Cecilia replied. Ronald closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to absorb the blow. When he reopened them, his gaze fixed on Beatrice, who remained distant, surrounded by journalists eager for a statement. And the other projects? The same thing, Mariana confirmed. There's a small food basket distribution post in Tower Hamlets, and a room with some computers in Poplar that they call a digital center. Nothing even remotely close to what is advertised. The next stop was the shed in Kent Downs. When they arrived, Cecilia noticed that Beatrice had paled drastically. The place was exactly as she had left it. The chair with the cut ropes, the bag with water and food, the oppressive silence of the abandoned structure. Ronald walked slowly inside the shed, touching the chair, examining the ropes. Every object seemed to confirm a truth he still struggled to accept. When he finally turned to face his wife, his eyes were moist. Why? The simple question carried the weight of all his pain and disappointment. Beatrice, cornered by the physical evidence of her act, let tears flow freely. They were no longer calculated tears, but those of someone watching her world collapse. I came from nothing, Ronald. I grew up seeing my cleaner mother humiliated in houses like yours. I swore I would never go through what she did, that I would build a different life. Her voice trembled. When we married, I thought I was finally safe, but I soon realized that being just the wife of wasn't enough. I needed my own identity, my own recognition. And that's why you decided to use the foundation. The foundation was dying when I took over. It was just one among many charitable initiatives with no real impact. I transformed it into something relevant, put it on the map. Yes, I exaggerated. The numbers brought some projects forward, but I had real plans to implement them eventually. With what money? Cecilia intervened. The donations have already been spent, Beatrice, on events, on publicity, on your personal image. Beatrice lowered her eyes. I was going to fix it. I had a plan to raise more funds. Based on more lies, Ronald completed. He stepped away, walking to the shed door as if he needed air. Journalists maintained a respectful distance, but their cameras recorded everything. When Ronald returned, his expression had changed. The pain was still there, but now accompanied by a firm resolution. It's all over, Beatrice. The foundation, our marriage, everything. He turned to the journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Montgomery family, I apologize to everyone who trusted our institution. As of today, the Montgomery Foundation is officially closed for a full audit. All projects are suspended, and all partners will be reimbursed. He paused. As for the beneficiaries who have been harmed, such as the residents of Brixton Hill, I personally promise that every commitment made will be honored, even if it means using my private resources. Beatrice took a step forward, attempting a final appeal. Ronald, please, we can start over, we can fix this. No, Beatrice, some things, once broken, cannot be mended. He looked at his mother, who observed the scene with a mixture of sadness and relief. Let's go home, Mother, it's over. As the group returned to their vehicles, Beatrice remained alone in the shed, the realization of her defeat finally settling upon her. Her empire of appearances, built over years with carefully crafted lies, had crumbled in a matter of hours. Outside, Cecilia approached Mariana. Thank you for your help. Without you and your cousin, I could have been here for much longer. No need to thank me, Mrs. Cecilia. You are a woman of courage. Mariana smiled. And now, what happens to the community? That center would really make a difference for us. Cecilia held the community leader's calloused hands. Don't worry. When my son makes a promise, he keeps it. He is a man of his word, unlike. She looked towards the shed, where Beatrice remained alone. Unlike some people. On the way back, to the estate, the silence in Ronald's car was almost tangible. Cecilia respected her son's silent grief, knowing he would need time to process the betrayal and disappointment. Beatrice had been left at the shed, at her own request, claiming she needed time to think. Claude had been tasked with picking her up later and taking her to a hotel, as returning to the Montgomery estate was out of the question. Upon their arrival, Josephine waited anxiously at the door. Her face lit up upon seeing Cecilia safe and sound. Thank goodness you're all right. I was so worried. I'm fine, Josephine. Thanks to your help. Cecilia hugged the housekeeper. If you hadn't called Mariana as I asked. I don't even want to think about it, Mrs. Cecilia. Ronald went directly to his office, asking not to be disturbed. Cecilia respected his pain, knowing he needed space. She went up to her room, where she finally allowed exhaustion to overcome her. Lying in her bed, she mentally replayed the day's events, the kidnapping, the hours of anguish in the shed, the confrontation, the revelation of the truth. She had won, but the victory had a bitter taste. Later that night, a soft knock on her door announced Ronald's arrival. He entered, looking as if he had aged years in just a few hours. How are you, Mother? He asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm fine, son. And you? Ronald ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded Cecilia of the boy he once was. Destroyed, deceived, used. He sighed deeply. How did I not notice before? How was I so blind? Love blinds us, Ronald, and she was very good at what she did. Still, to let her use our name, our foundation. Don't blame yourself. You trusted her, as you should trust your wife. Ronald took his mother's hand in his. I almost lost you today, if something had happened. But it didn't. I'm here, we're together, and the truth has come out. That's what matters. They remained silent for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ronald spoke. I'm going to rebuild everything, Mother. The foundation, our reputation, people's trust. I'm going to do it right this time, honoring the legacy that Dad and you built. Cecilia smiled, feeling immense pride in her son. Despite the pain, he was already thinking about starting over, about mending what had been broken. I know you will, my son, and I'll be by your side every step of the way. Outside, the London night sparkled with thousands of lights, like stars within reach. At the Montgomery estate, mother and son shared a moment of reconciliation and renewal. While in some hotel in the city, Beatrice faced the consequences of her choices, alone with the ghost of the empire she had built and which now lay in ruins. For 2 weeks had passed since the revelation of Beatrice's lies. Autumn arrived in London, painting the trees with golden and reddish hues as if nature itself celebrated the renewal occurring in the Montgomery family and in the communities now, truly benefiting from the newly created Living Roots Foundation. It was the inauguration day of the Brixton Hill Professional Training Centre. Unlike the pompous ceremonies Beatrice used to organise, the event had a simple and authentic character. There was no red carpet, no journalists vying for the best angle, No elaborate speeches to impress businessmen and politicians. Instead, there was local music, food prepared by women from the community, and many children running around the spacious courtyard of the newly built centre. Cecilia observed everything with quiet satisfaction. Seated under the shade of a mango tree strategically planted in the centre of the courtyard, a symbol of permanence and growth, the Montgomery matriarch chatted animatedly with Mrs. Louise, a lady of similar age to her, a resident of the neighborhood for over 5 decades. "You can't imagine what this place means to us," Louise said, her eyes shining with emotion. "My granddaughter has already enrolled in the nursing assistant course. She always dreamed of working in healthcare, but we never had the means to pay for a course. And now she will have that opportunity," Cecilia completed, smiling, "and she will be helping many other people when she graduates. It's like a cycle of kindness, isn't it? A hand extended that then multiplies into many others." "Exactly so, Mrs. Louise. That's what Living Roots seeks to create. Cycles of transformation that expand naturally." On the other side of the courtyard, Ronald chatted with Mariana about the next phase of the project, the implementation of a local small business incubator. The community leader, now an official member of the Foundation's board of directors, presented concrete ideas based on the real needs and talents of the residents. "The group of women who make crafts is already producing quality pieces," she explained. "With an adequate space and management guidance, they could formalize a viable business." "I fully agree," Ronald replied. "We'll include that in the next quarter's budget. And how about we invite some retailers from Westfield, London, to see their work? We can create genuine commercial bridges." Mariana smiled, still surprised by Ronald's direct and honest approach, so different from the experience she had had with Beatrice. "That would be perfect. They need access to markets that value quality manual work." Claude, who now coordinated the Foundation's logistics, approached the group, carrying a folder with documents. "Dr. Ronald, the certificates for the first class of students have arrived. They look very good." "Excellent, Claude. Leave them in my office. I will make sure to sign each one personally." The former driver nodded, satisfied with his new position. In the first months after the incident, he had faced the burden of guilt for having participated in Cecilia's kidnapping, even if involuntarily. But the opportunity for redemption offered by Ronald and the trust Cecilia had placed in him had transformed not only his career but also his self-esteem. Gilbert, Mariana's cousin who had helped in Cecilia's rescue, had also found a place in the new Foundation structure. His knowledge of London's streets and communities had made him the perfect coordinator for a project mapping emergent social needs in the city. "Mrs. Cecilia," he called, approaching the matriarch with an envelope in his hands. "Something arrived for you earlier today. Since I thought you would come straight to the inauguration, I brought it with me." Cecilia thanked him and examined the envelope, immediately recognizing the handwriting. It was from Beatrice. She felt a slight tremor in her hands as she opened the correspondence, not knowing what to expect. Inside there was a simple card and a photograph. On the card, a few words. "Cecilia, I see from the newspapers that the Living Roots Foundation is flourishing. It's comforting to know that something good was born from the storm I caused. Here in Edinburgh, I'm learning to cultivate real things, not appearances. My sister's workshop now employs 15 women from the Leith community. It's small, honest, and genuine. Everything I never allowed my projects to be. I send this photo not to boast, but to show that seeds of truth, even if planted late, can germinate. With respect, Beatrice." The photograph showed Beatrice, simply dressed, alongside a group of smiling women in front of a small shop with the sign New Paths Atelier, ethical and sustainable fashion. Her face looked different, not just due to the absence of the elaborate makeup she used to wear, but because of a more serene, more authentic expression. Cecilia put the card and photo in her pocket, touched by the unexpected communication. Perhaps Beatrice really was changing. Or perhaps she was just building a new facade. Time would tell. In any case, it was comforting to know that her ex-daughter-in-law had found a less destructive path. The official inauguration ceremony began at dusk. A simple green ribbon, the color chosen to symbolize Living Roots, was cut by Mrs. Louise and her 7-year-old grandson, representing the different generations who would benefit from the center. There were no long speeches, just brief words from Ronald, thanking everyone who made the project possible. "This center does not belong to the Living Roots Foundation," he declared. "It belongs to each of you, residents of Brixton Hill. We merely facilitated its construction, but it is you who will bring it to life, who will transform it into a space for real growth and opportunities." When night fell, small decorative lights automatically turned on, illuminating the courtyard with a warm glow. A local band began to play, and gradually a spontaneous samba circle formed. Cecilia watched the scene with a heart full of joy. That was real. The music, the laughter, the hugs, the community celebrating an authentic achievement. Ronald approached, offering his mother a glass of juice. "Happy, mother." "Very, my son. This is exactly what your father and I dreamed of when we created the original foundation." She paused, contemplating the starry sky that was beginning to appear. "You know, sometimes we need to lose our way to rediscover our true north. You always find wisdom even in the most difficult experiences. It's the privilege of age, Ronald, to live long enough to see cycles complete." She smiled, watching a group of children dancing joyfully to the sound of samba. "I received a card from Beatrice today." Ronald visibly tensed. What did she want? "Just to share that she's trying to rebuild her life more honestly." Cecilia gently touched her son's arm. "And we don't need to carry her eternally as a ghost between us. She made her choices, is living the consequences and apparently seeking a better path." Ronald nodded, thoughtful. The mention of Beatrice still brought a pang of pain, but less acute than before. "You're right, Mother. We can't let the past prevent us from fully living the present." "Exactly. And this present," she gestured to the celebration around them, "is worth every moment of pain we went through." A few hours later, as the party was still lively, Cecilia decided it was time to go home. Ronald would stay longer, finalizing some details with the team, but insisted that Claude take her back to the estate. On the way, as the car passed through contrasting neighborhoods of London, from the periphery to the affluent areas, Cecilia reflected on the twists and turns life held, even at 75. She had never imagined she would face such a dramatic situation at this stage of life, nor that she would find so much strength within herself to overcome it. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Cecilia?" Claude asked, noticing her silence in the rearview mirror. "Everything is great, Claude. Just thinking about how surprising life is. A year ago, I was observing my garden from the window, worried about the subtle changes I perceived in the family. Today, after so much storm, I see a much more vibrant garden flourishing, not just mine, but the ones we are planting in communities all over London." "You are an inspiration to all of us," Claude said sincerely. "Your strength has changed many lives, including mine." "Each of us has that strength, Claude. Sometimes we just need circumstances that compel us to find it." Upon arriving at the estate, Cecilia went straight to the garden, even though it was night. Under the moonlight, her orchid seemed almost ethereal. She sat on her favorite bench and deeply inhaled the perfumed air. Life, like her precious flowers, was both resilient and delicate. It demanded constant care, attention to subtle signs, and above all, genuine love. Not for appearance, but for essence. "Thank you," she whispered to the starry sky, without specifying to whom she directed her gratitude. Perhaps to the universe, perhaps to herself, perhaps to all the people who were part of this journey of rediscovery. Life had taught her, in her 75 years, that sometimes we need to be thrown among the rubble to rediscover our true worth, and that even after the most devastating storms, new seeds can germinate, stronger and more authentic than before. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Mrs. Cecilia Montgomery's story has touched your hearts. To follow other equally moving narratives, we have prepared a special playlist of British stories that explore human strength, resilience, and the capacity to start anew. Find it by clicking on the icon to the left of the video. If this journey of reconstruction and authenticity resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexities and the small, great victories of everyday British life. Share in the comments if you have ever witnessed situations where truth, however painful, paved the way for positive transformations in your lives. Your experiences are valuable and can inspire other listeners who are going through difficult times. Until the next story, where we will once again sail together through the exciting waters of drama. overcoming challenges and new beginnings.